Fortnite, the gaming battle royale phenomenon, is headed for disaster in two distinct ways. The first way is actually pretty cool and will happen very soon, potentially. For quite a while now, Epic Games has been dropping hints and Easter eggs about a meteor or a comet that may hit the Tilted Towers on the 18th. There is a huge spread of evidence to support it, ranging from the map's geographical makeup compared to Poland, the country, the Morse code of controller rumble patterns, and a bunch of other things. But suffice it to say that it's a likelihood at this point, given Fortnite's current space theme and the importance right now in the Battle Royale mode of the Tilted Tower landmark and its kind of portfolio of other evidence that supports this theory. That's the cool kind of disaster, and it's not really a disaster, honestly. It's more of an event within the game's universe. If you love the Tilted Towers, then it might be a disaster to you personally, but that's the fun one. Now we're on to the not so fun disaster. Before really diving in, I want to warn everyone to be prepared. This has a healthy amount of my own speculation, but in my years as a content creator, I've built up a contact list that represents a pretty decent cross-section of gamers, and I like to base topics like this off of feedback from more than a few sources. That being said though, there will be a lot of speculation, and I'm not going to hide that. It is undebatable that Fortnite has risen to near colossal player base proportions and heights that many games could never even dream of. But in its rapid ascent, capturing a diverse set of demographics and dominating the Battle Royale space, it may have set itself up for epic disaster. The first thing that some may not understand is that Fortnite itself and the Fortnite Battle Royale mode are not really the same thing. Fortnite Battle Royale was an afterthought. It was a mode that was tacked on top of a base game to capitalize on an existing gaming popularity trend that had accelerated into the spotlight recently, right before that, by PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. The Battle Royale section of Fortnite makes up some tiny fraction of the actual game, and it's not where the bulk of resources were spent or went during its initial base development cycle. Still, utilizing the core mechanics from the true Fortnite game, which is a horde and tower defense game kind of ish at its base, the Battle Royale section in particular was able to flourish. Fortnite brought new mechanics to bear in a way that no other Battle Royale had in the past. The building mechanic drastically changed the execution of encounters and layered in an entire new strategic element that simply didn't exist anywhere else. Factor in on top of that a significantly more friendly atmosphere to junior players, and you had a mode that justifiably rose at a meteoric rate into the spotlight. On top of all of this as well, Fortnite's Battle Royale component is free to play. The same cannot be said of its previous competitors, which yielded yet another checkmark in Fortnite's favor. The game expanded exponentially with its player base, but has, and will continue to, fail at monetizing most of those players. Don't get me wrong, free is very, very good, but it contributes to the problem that Fortnite may be facing in the future. The next major problem is something more polarizing, and to some it may in fact actually be a strength. But when a game appeals to different demographics, there are often mutual exclusivity to their preferences. There are a healthy chunk of professionals, or a different term I guess that some may prefer would be hardcore players, quote unquote, that have gravitated to Fortnite because of the added dimension of building. The strategy involved is undeniable, and the ability to construct an entire fortress on the fly, trap opponents, and dictate the pacing of encounters with more than just good aim is refreshing. However, with additional gameplay mechanics comes additional balancing, and that is not always well received. Epic Games has been rolling out patches for quite some time now, some good, some bad, but the core intention appears to be at certain intervals, decreasing the skill gap and allowing more novice players to compete against opponents who may outpace them in mechanical skill when it comes to building specifically. There are a whole slew of changes that can be reviewed, but one key common thread seems to be traceable to an underlying intention of allowing players that maybe do not focus on the building section or otherwise are not as adept with the controls when attempting it to still compete through numerical value changes, and this spells disaster. With Battle Royales cropping up a dime a dozen, now even reflecting an almost identical art style to Fortnite at times, the building is the only thing that truly stands tall as a unique mechanic. When downplaying the building portion of the game in favor of more generic elements, which are present in any number of other titles, it will inevitably turn some portion of their player base away from the game in favor of any one of those alternatives. That does, kind of the same things that Fortnite would be turning to and pushing, but better. Where Fortnite pushes hypersensitivity into aiming and emphasizes split-second reflexes, why would you not switch over to PUBG to get that fix? Obviously, this is not unimpeachable logic and it does not apply to every single player, but the point is, when they balance aggressively towards or away from certain mechanics, they will push back and forth with or against their different demographics of players. Obviously, you cannot please everyone. The sad truth is that everything nowadays inevitably offends someone. But within my own circle of contacts, streamers, creators, and also everyday gamers, I have already started to see an exodus of players who are switching to alternative battle royale experiences away from Fortnite. The disaster I see is not a cataclysmic one that would end the existence of Fortnite. That is unlikely to even be possible, honestly. That's not what I'm arguing. The disaster I see is a game that sits for very long periods of time in a state of being that is nebulous, where it does not know what it wants to be. It tries to appeal to everyone, thus appealing to hardly anyone, and every time a new Battle Royale experience launches, a huge chunk gets bitten right out of its concurrent player numbers. It's far from a guarantee, but it's absolutely a possibility. Some big names in the gaming space have been touching on this topic and starting to draw more attention to it. And with Fortnite in particular, there are some gargantuan streamers and YouTubers who exclusively cover the game and whom could have a tremendous impact should they fall into this category of users who feel at odds with the balancing shifts, which have been coming consistently over time. The final point that I want to make is the lack of any sort of skill-based matchmaking present within the game. Fortnite has at the moment something like 3 million concurrent players and 45 million total players. And within that group, there is a percentage makeup of players who barely know what they are doing, maybe played one round before, and it's like they're just there for the aesthetics of it. Then there's the players that know the game, but they really only play when they're bored once a week. Then there's the more serious players who hold their own, and it ranges all the way up to the players with intimate knowledge of where exactly to build, with what material to block every single type of projectile they need, or, they can advance their position unhindered. And these players, rightly so, through thousands of hours of practice, are completely destroying 99% of their competition. Fortnite needs to give those players a home to scratch their competitive itch. Without a skill-based matchmaking queue of any kind, they are pitting players with expert-level skills against first-timers even as a result. And, well, it's pretty obvious how that ends. With a game that so heavily appeals to a casual audience, but a lack of differentiation in skill tiers, Fortnite and Epic Games are taking up some of that slack by balancing certain mechanics with the intention of compressing said skill gap. That, period, never, period, works. Double period. When you provide a boost to any one segment of gameplay, all players can utilize that, and with metas being what they are in online games, you simply change the method by which the more experienced veteran players eliminate the less experienced, more casual audience. Simply doing numerical buffs and nerfs like that isn't going to compress the skill gap in a meaningful way. It's not going to let the casual players beat the hardcore players in any discernible pattern. It's really just going to infuriate the people that relied on that mechanic or got used to it. So balancing changes are a double-edged sword. It's a whole entire video I will do eventually in and of itself, like which demographic is more important, and truthfully there is no 100% answer to it. Every demographic and every type of player and gamer has their value. But balancing a game around both simultaneously can have catastrophic consequences for player enjoyment. Fortnite will by no means disappear, but competition is fierce and the arena is only getting more crowded. Cool events, like this meteor thing that could go down, are a great way to get ahead of the pack and maybe fix map composition in one of the most dynamic of ways possible. But player engagement in a free-to-play game, factored on top of everything else Fortnite may and likely will face in the future, could spell disaster for the game. Not disaster in the sense of annihilation, but disaster when directly compared to where it is now and how far it could fall. With all that being said, I want to turn it over to all of you. Any creator nowadays would be hard-pressed to not have a multitude of Fortnite players in their social circles. And sometimes YouTube comments are, to say the very least, a clown show. But other times I learn some of the most valuable insights I have ever uncovered in my entire stint as a creator in the depths of the YouTube comments. So I'd love to pose this question. What do all of you think? There are assuredly some Fortnite players watching this right now who are far more versed in the game's inner workings than I am. What do you guys think? Likewise to the players who barely know a thing about what the game even is and what kind of changes that they could possibly make, what do you want to see? What do you see being necessary to your own enjoyment? Either way though, if you're passionate, be it positive or negative, let me know in the comments down below. That's all I have today, though. As always, check out the links down below, and there's a bunch of other sections of the community, and specifically join us on the forums to help us keep the discussion and events rolling through a wide range of alternative games. As always, though, have a nice night, guys.